thanks for coming, everyone. So just before I get going, I wanted to just get a show of hands. I'm gonna ask 3 questions, all similar. So put up your hand for just one of them, because if you're putting up your hand for more than one of them, I'm doing something wrong in asking the question. Who here knows close to nothing about blockchain and has just been hearing about it a lot and needs to find out more? Hands really super high. Okay, awesome. That's like 30% or more of you. Who knows a little bit, you have a little bit of an understanding, but you have just heard a lot, you don't know what's fact, what's fiction, and you just want to learn more. Hands really super high. Okay, that's awesome. That's like the majority of you. So the last group, which I'm expecting there to be not too many of, who here is like a blockchain expert and thinks that they should be here instead of me? Nobody? Come on, somebody. Yeah, all of these guys. Yeah, I am not a blockchain expert by any means, so yeah. So the purpose of today is to get everybody to beyond question number 2. We're not going to be able to solve all of your queries about blockchain in an hour, but what we are trying to do is get you to a point where you will understand the basic concepts. You'll have let's call it a skeptical eye towards the stuff that you read in the news, and also understand how it's actually going to change our profession and our world. So with that all taken care of, let's start the introductions. So starting on that side, we have Saad Imran. Saad is the founder and managing partner of Node Blockchain. And just by the way, I'm not going to actually explain what all these companies do because I'm going to get them to pitch it for you because I'll just screw it up. Saad founded Node Blockchain in 2017, which in the blockchain world is actually like a really long time ago. And he started his career at Deloitte in the tech space. Next up, we have Katie. So first of all, everybody please give Katie a huge round of applause because she just got promoted. Yeah. So if you read our event description, you would see the title controller, but now she is the director of finance at CoinSquare Mining. So what that actually means is that she handles financial reporting, controls, treasury, and she also supports the M&A and due diligence functions of the group. So really neat job there. And she comes from EY, also their tech practice in both Toronto and San Fran. And finally, we have Alan Wunsch, who Alan is, okay, I'm only going to tackle like half of his, not even, probably like a quarter of his resume, but let's just talk about like currently CEO and Chief Token Officer at Token Funder, which is, he's repping the shirt like a real startup guy. Chair and co-founder of Blockchain Canada. He is the Canadian chair of the Blockchain Standards Committee. So he's worked at Deloitte, PwC, Scotiabank, a lot of those companies that we probably work at or have worked for. And also, which I think is really important, he actually sits on CPA Canada's Audit Innovation Committee. So a lot of relevance to what we're talking about today. Okay, so I am going to start. Unfortunately, we have only one mic tonight, guys, so we're just going to have to pass the hot tamale. But what I'd like to do is start with you guys just pitching what your business is. So we can start with Saad. And
Thanks, Mike. Sorry for being a little late here. No worries. So Node Blockchain was founded last year, and it was founded around the premise that these crypto assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., are forming a new asset class. So my co-founder and I decided to build financial tools for institutional investors that will eventually come into the space and want to invest so that they have data analytics, research, and other tools to actually invest in this space in a more sophisticated manner. So I think what we saw last year with the hype and buzz and the appreciation in prices drew a lot of attention for these investors, but there wasn't a lot of substance here yet. But now as more and more of these protocols and companies that are around them start building in this space, we're going to see more and more attention from more sophisticated institutional investors to come into this space and invest in a more pragmatic manner. And that's what we're building our tools around. So that's Node Blockchain.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie. I'm, like Michael said, the Director of Finance at CoinSquare Mining. CoinSquare Mining is a subsidiary of CoinSquare, which is Canada's largest cryptocurrency exchange. So we have a platform that allows individuals such as yourself to buy, sell, trade Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and a whole bunch of other exciting things. Specifically in my business unit, we secure and maintain the blockchain through the process of actually mining Bitcoin and Litecoin. And our ultimate goal is to be a financial institution of the 21st century.
Love that last part.
She got the pitch down.
Yeah. Great to see you guys all here, by the way. It's exciting to see, what I look around is like the next generation of our financial leaders in Canada here. So I've gone through a lot in my career. I'm just going to tell you what I'm up to these days. And I have the exciting role of CEO of Token Funder. And specifically Token Funder, if you think about, we're going to get to, what are all these cryptocurrencies and whatnot. We have the ability to disrupt the capital market space and allow for companies to use this new technology that we can call smart tokens and other kind of programmable digital assets to allow them to raise capital, to raise it in very unique ways. And we've started off with something very basic. You think about it as kind of this next evolution of crowdfunding with cryptocurrencies. And essentially, the premise is and the promise is that we're in a much more efficient way of funds moving across the world. We've got global movement of this new digital asset called cryptocurrency. So, global access to capital. And we've got a ton of startups that are looking for looking for capital. And if we can give them access to this, we're going to spur innovation. We're going to spur the influx of funds to these great new companies that may not always get in the door of venture capitalists and such. So instead of how it always had to be that you'd go down to Silicon Valley, kind of startup cap in hand, or to your local, venture capitalist, because they are here in Canada. But you can just now imagine taking your company to this new blockchain service that we are building to provide, and essentially issuing a token offering. So instead of an initial public offering, you've got an initial token offering, and allowing for not only accredited investors but retail investors to also participate, because there's so much going on here that the retail investor today continues to get shut out of really great deals. So really great companies are being built, and it's those that are very wealthy that continue to get wealthier because they've got the opportunities to invest in these. So so there's many different themes going on here. The real efficiency of capital movement and the potential for that, and also the democratization of this innovation economy. So there's many different layers to this, and we're working this out. So I've been in the blockchain space for almost 4 years now, and we've come a tremendous long way, but we're still in a massive socio-economic experiment called this blockchain and cryptocurrency world, where it will be a few years from now. I can only get out a crystal ball because living in the space, I may not fully know. I'm going to stop there because I think we're doing a little intro.
Yeah. No, he's excited about it, which is why everybody's here today. So what we're going to do now, this is going to be a little bit different. Like normally in the panel discussions, they're actually generally topics that don't need to be explained from the top down. But we're going to do that this time because I think it's important, and I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there about what it is, what it isn't. So we are going to do it this way. I'm going to ask Alan to give us a very high level on the subject. We're going to time him at 5 minutes. No, we don't need to be that bad. But no, but we'll try for like kind of 5 minutes to get a real core of like how blockchain works, effectively what it is, and then we'll go to Saad, who will talk about the applications that we're talking about now and in the near term, and then Katie, who can talk more at length on the infrastructure that's around in the blockchain space. So that will be part one, and then we'll actually get into more of the traditional panel type of discussion. Okay, so let's get rocking. We will hand the mic back to Alan. Tell us, what is blockchain?
What is blockchain? Blockchain is not one thing, by the way. So let's just get this going. Okay, so who's heard of Bitcoin? I'm going to now talk fast. Who's heard of Bitcoin? Okay, who has Bitcoin? Okay, actually good, a few of you. Okay, so Bitcoin was in 2009 launched as a peer-to-peer digital cash. So it had this vision of having you and me being able to transfer without a financial intermediary something of value, and that was called Bitcoin. The underlying technology that actually allows for this to happen is now been genericized as being called blockchain technology. So blockchain, and those of you that want a little primer, I should give a plug though, because CPA Ontario did a crypto white paper earlier this year, and you should all download it, by the way. So there you go. I got your plug in, Vic.
That guy over there, Vic.
Yeah,
One of the guys
go
that
download it, because I worked with Vic and others to get the word out. It's important you get it. Okay, so back to Bitcoin was the very first generation of this, and I could now transfer something of value directly from a wallet from myself to any one of you without going through a financial institution. How does that actually happen? There are, let's say each one of you were running a computer, and we put open source software called Bitcoin onto your machines. And this now is a transaction that says I'm going to send a Bitcoin for myself, okay, to Katie, right? This particular transaction comes into all of your computers into basically a queue. Now, you are also seeing lots of other transactions come into this pool. You're all providing a service that is running the Bitcoin blockchain network, and you're all basically providing a security service. And how's this actually happening? Because this transaction comes to you, you look at it and you say, is this a valid transaction? Is this something that is allowed? You take a look at this global ledger that you all maintain a copy of, each one of you keeping your own copy on your own computer, and you say, well, is that a valid transaction? Okay, it looks like a valid transaction. I'm going to put it into what I believe could be the next block. So I'm packaging up a whole bunch of transactions that all of you, you've received these from the network. Now, the first one of you to, in a very automated manner, the software automatically runs some algorithms to solve a mathematical puzzle. As soon as you solve that puzzle, as soon as your particular node that's running the software solves the puzzle, you get the privilege of creating the next block, which is a packaged up form of the transactions that went into the network, okay? So this block is referred to as a block in the blockchain, but it's a virtual package of transactions. Now you're stamping it, you're taking the fingerprint of this block, and then the next block that's created contains the fingerprint of that previous block. So you've got n plus 1, n plus 2, and we go on like this. So every 10 minutes in the Bitcoin blockchain, you create a new block. All of you're competing to create the next block, and that mining node that got the block gets the reward, which is, again, predetermined by the software. So pretty straightforward. You're all providing this security service.
Pretty straightforward.
You're now, but continue the cycle, because now, in order for you add those transactions to the ledger. So there's a global distributed ledger, and we also call blockchain distributed ledger technology. And you've all maintained this next block, and you've added it to your sequence. And we can all collectively, by the way, go to like blockchain.info and look at the transactions in these blocks. Now, what's important here is that mathematically, and you're running cryptography, and mathematically speaking, we are now applying, taking that fingerprint of the block, embedding it in the next block, which again gets a fingerprint, embeds in the next block, and that fingerprint is driven by all of the data of the transactions in the block. And this, don't cut me off yet, because I'm going to the programmable blockchain stuff very quickly next. Okay. What's important about this is that you've got many different blocks that are sequential, and now you've got a time-based set of transactions, and you've got them sequentially. And if I was a hacker and I wanted to hack into this global ledger that you all maintain, this now requires me, let's say we're at like n+9, and I want to change a transaction that's way back in block n. I have to go and hack into every one of your computers over the course of the next 10 minutes before the next block gets created, change that transaction, find a way to do all that on all of your copies before the next one's created. But by the way, I have to then change the blocks n+1, n+2, n+3, n+4, n+5 all over every single node across the world, which has not happened yet. So the Bitcoin blockchain has not been hacked. And it's that, so you're all providing essentially a security service for transaction processing around the world. And so I send this Bitcoin transaction to Katie. No bank gets involved. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing to some folks that I've been talking. Several years ago, I do this panel, and I'm asking these real executives, like, okay, so how many banks were involved in this? And they're all, I think, 0. Yeah, exactly. So this is where now we're talking disruption to our financial system potentially, and an alternative monetary system. What's really cool is Ethereum. So Ethereum came to be in 2014 as a white paper, launched in 2015. I was in like this small cadre of folks on Spadina when it hit, and the first block was created in Ethereum in 2015, and we're like, new blockchain. Well, what's so exciting about this is that the group that started it, and he was a Waterloo dropout, Russian kind of immigrant to Canada, and then his name is Vitalik, great young man, now essentially almost, well, we won't talk about his value, but here's the thing. He unleashed a new model on the world, that there's a next generation version of this blockchain that can be programmable. So now I can program something called smart contracts and allow for the blockchain to accept actual code. So the Ethereum blockchain, as a programmable blockchain, essentially acts like a world computer. So I can put some code in to the blockchain, and it executes without censorship, without some government saying that code cannot execute, because it's permissionless as a public blockchain for me to insert some code that could be of good use, could be of any kind of frankly use, because it's a public blockchain, as I kind of alluded to earlier. And this particular one allows you to insert logic, insert programs into it, and where we'll talk about tokens later, is tokens are essentially code. And creating tokens on a programmable blockchain like Ethereum takes some skill, takes some programming skill if you want to do something that's not just plain vanilla, or it can be just a couple of minutes that you can deploy some super basic code, 20 lines of code, and you can create your own new cryptocurrency. This is a permissionless structure, a common good that the entire world uses. Now, in Bitcoin, you get this reward on every 10 minutes. You build the block as that node. In Ethereum, currently there's a similar mining mechanism, but they're going to be moving to something called proof of stake, which uses less electricity. For those of you concerned with the Bitcoin's electricity usage, because we all are. And as well, so Ethereum uses this concept of gas. You use the native digital currency Ether to fund the running of this smart contract. So if you say, I want to put some code into the blockchain, and this code mimics a bank, which you can, very, very simply kind of mimic money coming in, of money flowing out, that sort of thing. You can mimic that, but you have to pay for that resource. So what you do is you pay some Ether gas for the rest of the network to run your code. So now we're not saying, put it on AWS, we're not putting it at somewhere else, we're actually putting it into this new public Ethereum programmable blockchain. And now from Ethereum in 2015, I'm going to pass the mic now, but from Ethereum 2015, in 2017 we saw Ethereum used primarily for initial coin offerings, and that was crazy hype, which we'll talk about. But it also spawned lots of other protocols that then, some of them took the Ethereum open software, forked it, made it into something else, and called it, their own blockchain, and basically try to incentivize people to get on that. Others have been building blockchains from scratch. So now you've got hundreds and hundreds of these blockchains, and that's why we've referred to it as this global socio-economic experiment, because you've got incentives, you've got economic disruption potentially, you've got the potential for disruption in capital markets. It's a really big, complex topic, and we're in the early stages of all this. So, exciting to have this kind of crowd thinking about this, because you really have to. And I'm a huge proponent of CPAs, getting into this very deeply, and I'm glad to see you here. Yeah, just
Okay, only because I know, yeah, like hands up if you want a short synopsis, as much as a guy who doesn't really get it can tell you.
You want to try that?
Yeah, I'm gonna try it. Okay, so here's just the basics for everybody, so that we can get to Saad and Katie in a way that makes sense. So, blockchain. Fundamental things that you need to know: the block is a block of data. It's kind of like a mini database. That data is connected to other mini databases, other blocks in the chain. That each of those blocks is developed independently by several different computers in the network. And what happens is one computer actually solves this crypto problem, this mathematical issue or problem that gives them the right to actually create that block. And that's why you have all sorts of companies that buy a bunch of computers to mine Bitcoin, because when you actually are the one that wins, you get Bitcoin or whatever cryptocurrency is around. And the reason that it's not hackable, or that it's very difficult to hack, is that to change an earlier block, because all of the blocks are connected sequentially, you actually need to change all of the blocks. And because they're constantly making new blocks, your own computing power technically needs to be more than 50% of the network's computing power to be able to beat the rest of the network at essentially creating the fraud that you're doing into the blockchain. So does that kind of hopefully adds a little bit in my kind of layman's terms there, because Alan probably said it a lot more accurately, but this is how much I've learned to understand it. So nonetheless, we will take that very initial kind of understanding of blockchain, and we will actually tackle ICOs and everything in a second, so don't worry on that one. And we'll pass it off to Katie to talk, first to Saad to talk about applications.
Thank you. So, funny enough, the first application of Bitcoin was actually Silk Road. How many of you are familiar with Silk Road? So Silk Road was an online drug marketplace, unfortunately, but it proved one very important thing with respect to Bitcoin, and that was the fact that anyone in the internet, anyone around the world could transact with someone else without a financial intermediary and couldn't be stopped, right? So that's what Silk Road proved. And that was kind of the first MVP use case of Bitcoin. You can use it for online e-commerce. You don't need PayPal. You don't need banks. You can do it anywhere in the world. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. No one can stop you. And that kind of sparked what was the second use case of Bitcoin, which was as a store of value. So once people saw that, we can transact with this thing, no one can stop us, we can also store our wealth using Bitcoin, and no one can take it away from us. And that was really interesting for me from an economics perspective, and actually from our circle as well. It was an interesting aspect because traditionally, the only other asset to do that at scale before Bitcoin was gold, right? People used gold as a safe haven asset, as a way to store their value in a way that governments couldn't seize them, in a way that banks couldn't seize them. But gold is not really convenient to carry around, and it's really difficult to move and transport. So Bitcoin became an interesting alternative to individuals who wanted to use it as a store of value. And the reason why this kind of picked up more and more amongst individuals was they quickly realized, as Alan mentioned, this is a way to transfer, store, and hold value in a way that is censorship resistant, right? It can't be stopped. And the reason why that's possible is because of the blockchain, because it takes, it's not controlled by any single person. There's no single point of failure, and no one controls it. So that was Bitcoin, and Alan mentioned Ethereum, and I think Ethereum actually started, or the concept of smart contracts that really powered Ethereum really came before that as well, through Nick Szabo, who was the founder of, or the creator of smart contracts. And he said something really interesting. He said, this is the first time ever we have a way to enforce contracts without using violence. Think about that. It's the first time ever to enforce a contract without using any form of violence. Traditionally, today, if you want to enforce a contract, you have to go to court, and obviously court carries a threat of violence, putting you in jail. But in the form of a smart contract on a blockchain, if two parties agree that this is the terms that we're setting for this deal, and they put them onto that blockchain, it automatically executes the terms of that deal without any single party having to intervene. And that results in a way where you can transact with other people around the world, anywhere in the world, without having to rely on courts, without having to rely on violence. And that's a really powerful concept for Ethereum and blockchain today. So that's a concept that's starting to grow in popularity, and we're starting to see more iterations of this idea come out today. ICOs happen to be the first use case for it, a new way to raise capital from anyone around the world for any idea you may have without having to go through courts, without having to go through banks. We're probably going to see this expand further. There's a concept of a security token now being introduced, which we're pretty excited for. We think it's an innovative way for traditional companies as well, not just startups, traditional companies that previously never had access to liquidity to gain that through a tokenized security. So a good example of this would be, let's say you own 20 Tim Hortons franchises and you're looking to liquidate some of your holdings. You don't want to go through the private route, but you want to have liquidity on your investments. You might be retiring, you might be planning for something, whatever the case may be. You now have an opportunity to issue a tokenized security of your 20 franchises, or whatever the case may be, to anyone who wants to purchase them on the internet, and they'll have access to the revenue stream that you'll be getting through your franchises. So it really opens up a way to, a new way for capital formation to arise amongst the private market, which I was really excited about, coming from Deloitte, working in the private space that we never previously had access to before. And just as Alan mentioned, it also opens up a lot of new investment opportunities for traditional retail investors who previously only had access to public equities and other instruments such as that.
Okay, wonderful, thanks. So what we'll do is, Katie, I'm going to get you to talk about the infrastructure as it is today and what's missing from that infrastructure. And I don't know if you want to tackle ICOs as well, or you can pass back to Saad and he can do that, whichever one you prefer. Because I think it's an area we didn't actually explicitly talk about ahead of time, but it's something that we should at least cover at a really high level.
Okay, so blockchain infrastructure. I wanted to try and equate this to a real world scenario that you guys might have experienced. And either I'm totally going to date myself with this or you guys will understand. But currently we're like 1995 with the internet. So like you got home from school, you wanted to go on MSN Messenger to talk to your friends, but you sat down at your computer, it was clunky, there was a bad interface, the internet connection was really slow. And to actually get onto the internet, you had to tell your parents to get off the phone so you could connect. And then it made that really awful noise. And then maybe 20 minutes later, you finally were able to sign online. So for me right now, coming from a more traditional background and trying to make the bridge between blockchain and the real world, that's sort of where the infrastructure of the blockchain is currently. It's clunky, it doesn't make sense to people who don't have ease of use and the actual ability to understand what is going on. So luckily, we are the early adopters of the blockchain, and being at the age that we are now, have a lot of opportunity to be able to actually develop and grow the blockchain and actually build the infrastructure that lays on top of it. The second most important thing I think for like CAs to actually understand and the difference between the current world and the blockchain world is how the store of value will actually change. So with the internet, you have your base layer protocol like your TCP/IP or your HTTPS, that there are protocols that actually sit on top of the underlying internet infrastructure. So if you think of the value that the actual internet protocol holds that allows you to actually send information or look at things online, it's almost negligible. But if you look at the value of Facebook, that's value, like market cap of 400 billion, or Google, $800 billion, those are all infrastructures that lay on top of an existing protocol. The biggest shift that will happen with the blockchain is the underlying protocols maintain and store the value. So the underlying protocol of blockchain or Litecoin or Ether are actually the stores of value. So if you look at the total cryptocurrency market cap right now, today, compared to last year, not great, but today is around 250 billion US dollars. If you look at the value of the companies that actually sit on top of the blockchain and service the blockchain, the value of those companies is almost negligible. So our cryptocurrency exchange CoinSquare, yeah, it's worth $400 million, but compared to the store of value that will grow with the actual token protocols as compared to the companies that will sit on top of it, there's going to be a very stark inverse in value. So that's something that, as someone who works in financial reporting and finance, I think is something really important for people to understand. In terms of the infrastructure that we use at CoinSquare, we have developed a cryptocurrency exchange. So there are two types of exchanges. There's centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges. So from a centralized perspective, it works the same way as like the New York Stock Exchange or the TSX, where we take people's money, deposit it onto our platform the same way that you would deposit it onto like E-Trade or CIBC, whatever. And then you are able to actually bid and ask for the price of the coin that you are wanting to sell. So for Bitcoin example, today trading somewhere around $6,200 US. If I want to sell a Bitcoin, I can put in my ask for what I want to sell it at, and someone who wants to buy, like my friend Ivana sitting here, can put in her bid. If she wants to buy a coin for, let's say, $6,000, and you're sitting in that mechanism where you're waiting for your bid and the ask to actually match. So that's one aspect of the exchange that we have on CoinSquare, which is very similar to traditional markets. Then we also have a market making function using our capital markets division. So that's for larger scale institutional investors where we are actually the market maker. So in my mining division, we actually mine Bitcoin and Litecoin. Unfortunately, the real world does not work in Bitcoin and Litecoin, so we have to liquidate a lot of our coins to actually fund our operations in fiat, which is another word for Canadian or US dollars. So we use the market maker at CoinSquare to actually have those transactions happen, and the spread between the bid and the ask when they're matching people is a profit to the actual exchange itself. In terms of where the infrastructure is going, I actually was just at a conference in the country of Georgia over the weekend, and there were some really interesting thought leaders there in terms of where the blockchain is actually going. So I don't know if anyone knows who Jihan Wu is, but he's the CEO of Bitmain, which is the largest hardware manufacturer of cryptocurrency mining machines. And they just actually filed some documentation around a potential IPO in China, which in the first 6 months of 2018, they actually generated close to $3 billion in revenue. So they're a very large company. And he was actually able to provide a lot of insights on where is the infrastructure now and where is it going. So if currently you think there's 20 million people using the blockchain, he's sort of projecting that over the next 10 years, there'll be 1 billion people who are potentially using the blockchain. That is a significant increase in use, although again, nowhere close to the internet and its current usage. So we still have a long way to go to be on par with that. But there's a lot of things that need to happen in order to facilitate that. So the first is regulatory and legal. That's something in finance at CoinSquare we deal with constantly. We want more regulation and more law, so we're not operating in a gray area. if you're going to do cryptocurrency right, which is sort of our mission, there need to be some sort of guidelines to follow, especially in the beginning. The second is increasing different types of use cases. So while we have a cryptocurrency exchange, if you just want to buy and sell Bitcoin and have a store of value, there's also really interesting use cases around like real estate and title transfer of property. You could even have the key to your house on a blockchain, and you're the only one actually authorized through the blockchain to open your home. From a more finance perspective, you could look at asset clearing or sweeping accounts through a blockchain and smart contracts. So really trying to improve and grow the use cases in order to, the third is mass adoption. So that's being able to get everyone like you in this room who doesn't understand what blockchain is currently or how to use it onto the actual networks to be able to facilitate the transactions.
Thanks a bunch. And maybe I'll just pass back to Saad to quickly. You were about to explain ICOs, and I think you held back. So let's get you to do that at a high level, and then we'll actually jump more into a conversation.
So the first major ICO was actually Aetherium back in 2014 or 15. I think they raised about 18 million US dollars, and at the time it was a really innocent way to raise capital. It was more of a Kickstarter campaign, right? Here you have a bunch of developers that are looking to build this tool and are asking other developers in the community to fund that tool for them so that they can use it to build applications on top. So just like a Kickstarter would, right? And essentially what they ended up doing was collecting these funds, putting them in a foundation, and that foundation would fund this open source project, which was Aetherium, for as long as it would exist. So that's how the first ICO occurred. What happened afterwards was a bit crazy. And it really started in 2017. So people started ICOing whatever you can think of, anything you can even imagine. I mean, probably the most honest ICO was a token that was launched, which was called the Useless Aetherium token, which funny enough actually raised $60,000. And the message was, do not give this ICO any money. We're just going to use it to buy electronics. Don't fund it. And people still funded it. That's just how crazy the market was. But it was interesting because any entrepreneur in the world, like Alan mentioned, could raise for their idea. They didn't have to go to Silicon Valley. They didn't have to go to New York. They didn't have to go to Toronto and meet with VCs. They could write a white paper, a pitch deck explaining what they wanted to do, put it on the internet, and whoever wanted to invest in them had the opportunity to do so. Now, it wasn't up to them to say, okay, is this a good idea or not, or is this a high-risk investment or not? It was up to the investor to determine whether or not it was. Unfortunately, most investors in ICOs last year were pretty unsophisticated, and that's why you had tokens like DentaCoin, which was supposed to be a token for dentists. I don't even know how it's going to be used, having a market capitalization of $3 billion at one point. Right, so that was the ICO story. That's how it started. But as this market is maturing now, most people have realized that these are essentially securities. People are investing in them as securities. So let's call a spade, and let's build a regulatory framework around them to ensure that the proper disclosures are given, the proper accounting standards are provided, the proper reporting, everything you would have with a public company, whatever the case may be, is applied to this marketplace as well. And that's really interesting for CPAs because it actually opens up a new opportunity for us, right? So there was a research project done by a law firm in the US around ICOs, what they promised in their white paper with respect to how they would use their funds and how they would lock up their funds, and what they actually coded into the smart contract so that they would be enforced. And what they found was less than 50% of what they actually promised in the white paper was actually coded and enforced in the smart contracts, right? Most people didn't read the smart contracts. Most people don't have the ability to do so. But because of that, the founders of these ICOs could take the funds and essentially do whatever they wanted with them. Now, there's an opportunity for the auditor of the future, so to say, who can take these terms and actually verify that they have been input into these smart contracts the way that they should be, and perhaps provide a stamp of approval or an audit opinion on a smart contract. And that way, investors coming in to invest in these ICOs have a level of confidence to say that an independent party checked that these terms have been put into the smart contract, and now we feel safer as investors. So, ICOs.
Great, thanks. So that actually took more than the time that I thought it was going to take, but also less, if that works out. Look, this is a super complex. This is a super complex topic. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time trying to learn about it, and I still feel like I'm completely ignorant on it. So as I said, we're trying to take on a mammoth task tonight, getting through as much of this as we can. So I know you've got lots of questions. What I am going to do is I'm actually going to push the Q&A till after the intended time. So what we'll do is we'll get into the rest of the conversation. We will end the formal part of the conversation, and anybody that would like to stick around for a Q&A with the panelists is super welcome to. But it's actually where Saad left us off is a really good place to transition, because I think that what a lot of us here are extremely interested in is how this thing is going to change accounting, how it's going to affect our profession, what it's going to do to job opportunities. You hear everything from, that's it, accountants are done, we're not needed anymore, to, that's a load of hogwash, and all the rest of that. So if I could just actually pose this to Alan, when you look at it, like, what are the big, let me say it this way, what are the big misconceptions around this and how it's going to affect accounting? And answer that in like 10 seconds. No.
We talked about this. There's no time limit. Here. So
You've got 7 left.
I've got 7 seconds left. Here's the thing. Misconceptions. I mean, it's all individual. Misconceptions around what this is going to do. So here's what you should know. Okay, this space, and we're just talking about the impact on our profession here. Okay, very super important. If you ever thought you're not techie, stop thinking that today. If you've ever thought I'm just not techie enough to understand this stuff, you have to. So this smart contract auditing service has talked about that. That's a space that is getting hotter because it's essentially, think about the transfer of internal, automated controls and computer controls into computer systems. So there's controls, and there are decisions that the software is now going to be making, and there are high-end tech firms that are now taking audit roles in terms of this smart contract place. Whereas you used to be the CPA firm would come in and do the testing of all the audit controls and the management controls, and then the computer controls. Now I would look to a company like Hosho. I would look to a company that you'd never have thought of before to do my smart contract auditing before I'd go to a CPA firm today. And I hate to say that, but I just don't believe there's not enough CPAs that really understand this stuff. The conversion of the intent to the actual code. So, what other misconceptions are there? Look, the audit side. Now here's a question of where we are today versus where we will be tomorrow. That little idea that everyone's got the same version of the ledger. There are now private versions of these blockchains that are being used amongst companies, such as Walmart. And Walmart said just the other day, today or yesterday, that their entire supply chain needs to sign up to their blockchain solution because there's going to be a trail of product through the entire supply chain. And Walmart is saying this is going to be part of their computer controls. This is going to be part of the supply chain system. Somebody's going to have to audit that on the one hand, but I can also tell you that it's quite possible for me to say, okay, you know what? We don't need a full-on audit because I trust how this code works, and whatever it says at the end, that last block, that's secure enough for me. I don't need to see all the necessary transactions because I believe that end state. So these things are now becoming this, end state machines, and you need to understand that, the audit of the future is going to rely on you auditing blockchain ledgers, essentially, and you're going to look at a state of a blockchain ledger. You may then say a consortium of 5 companies is using a similar blockchain ledger. You may do that entire consortium audit at the same time, rather than one company at another. That consortium of companies may just hire one audit firm to come and do that. So rather than individual company audit contracts, that sort of thing. So there's multiple layers to this. Auditing is one piece. Valuation is going to be another important piece. So what do you value today's crypto at? And there's all kinds of stuff that you're working with, I'm sure, in terms of valuing the crypto. So I'm good.
Wonderful. Thank you.
That 10 seconds.
That was a good
for
10
you.
seconds, right, everyone? That was good. Well, I think that this brings up a really important point, which is that obviously this is something that we're all going to need to become familiar with. And, I think of the people up here, Katie is probably the best to speak about this because she went from a straight up not blockchain job to one where she's living and breathing this thing every day. So I was hoping that maybe you could share with everybody here, it seems insurmountable, this crazy new technology that isn't traditionally the CPA strong suit, but it has to be for us to maintain relevance. So how can the people in this room try to future-proof their own careers to this kind of stuff?
So I think CAs in general are going to face the same struggle that anyone in the job market is. As the world becomes more digital and more things exist online, we as CPAs, I think, inherently are awful at data analytics and really understanding how things actually have relationships on financial statements. And when I was at Ernst & Young, I'll admit, whenever there was data analytics or training for that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, is it really that important? Now that I'm in my current job, it's never been more important to understand the data analytics and how the blockchain will transform financial reporting. So I'll speak to my colleague Mackenzie, who's in the audience. She's been working to complete an audit for CoinSquare, the parent company. And honestly, the blockchain has made our job more cumbersome. It's more difficult to complete an audit on a technology that is supposed to operate in an auditless environment because currently there is no infrastructure to audit a blockchain. So if you have a CPA firm who's doing an audit for a company who actually holds significant asset value and stores the value on a blockchain, but they don't know how to audit it, it becomes very difficult for them to issue an audit opinion. So we actually had someone at our company write software for our auditor to use to actually do the world's first crypto inventory count. And so that is actually something that now, interestingly enough, at CoinSquare, we could turn into a profit center and sell to other companies who are looking to do the same thing. So the main thing is, and this is something our CEO always tells us, is you need to be innovative. As a CPA, I know things are like checks and balances, but more than ever in this space, if you have an idea and you think that something will be able to transform the way you do your job or the way you approach the blockchain, we need those ideas in order to actually build the infrastructure. A great way just to learn about the blockchain, I initially went down the rabbit hole of YouTube. You honestly can spend hours on there, and it's a really, really, really good source. The other thing that I listened to was a podcast called Hash Power. I don't know if anyone's listened to it, but it's a 3-part series that goes over the basics of blockchain, investing in cryptocurrencies, and funding and forking. It's a really great listen. It's probably 4 hours total for all 3 parts, but YouTube, podcasts, and just thinking with innovation are the ways that you can maintain your relevance.
Maintaining relevance, by the way, changes every week. These podcasts, and I'm probably on I've got 20 in my podcast catcher. This space is constantly evolving, and I think what you're alluding to is that Hash Power one was fantastic. I shared it with everybody, and then Laura Shin was ex-Fortune. Now she got this podcast. Go and get Unchained and listen to it every week. It comes out. There's new stuff coming out, and it's once you're down that's into learning this, you have to stay current because it's constantly evolving.
Wonderful, thanks. So unfortunately, we are meeting closer and closer to our time. So I want to pass it back to Saad to end off the formal portion. But as I said, we'll end off the formal portion. We'll give anybody who wants to leave a chance to head out, and then we will reopen it up for questions from the audience, because I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of things to ask these folks, assuming you guys are willing to stick around for 15, 20 minutes. Awesome. So I think the way I wanted to end this, I'm going to start with Saad because I know he's got a couple of great ones, is the crazy wild stories of blockchain and why they are not something that you should listen to as a means for like your entrance into that space. So start with the crazy wild fun story and then explain what the lesson that you shouldn't learn from that story is.
So is this still part of the formal part?
This is part of the formal part. This is all you, man.
So I think the craziest story that we experienced as a firm early on, when we first got started in the space, it was as an asset management firm, and that was primarily because a lot of the people in our circle were interested in investing in this space, and came to us for advice, and we said, okay, let's just put together a small firm, a small fund, and we'll deploy your capital for you. So the craziest thing actually happened while we were operating this firm in December, and that obviously was peak euphoria. My partner at the time, who was our CIO, made a really strong investment case for Dogecoin, and he came to me and he said, this is something we have to get ahead of. We have to make a trade. We have to make an investment. I said, I can't explain this. I can't justify this. Why would we be making a big bet on Dogecoin, right? He said, well, here's why. Here's my thesis. This is what I think is going to happen. I said, okay, we'll make a small bet. Let's see what happens, right? Oh, so for those of you who don't know what Dogecoin is, it's actually a tipping currency that was created in 2014 or 15, I think. And there's a meme behind the currency itself, which is a little dog, right? And so, anyways, it was a joke. Right? It was created as a joke. No one really thought it would catch on, but it did. So, anyways, we made this trade in December 2017, right? And we made a small bet. We said, okay, we'll protect our downside. We know what it is. And next thing you know, Dogecoin is up 10x within 2 weeks. So a crazy story. Obviously, that points to the euphoria in the market, the craziness in the market at the time. And funny enough, looking back, it reminds me of a wise Warren Buffett quote, which was around bubbles. Like, why do bubbles exist? Why do they happen? Basically, what he said was, people see their neighbors who are dumber than them getting rich, so they get involved as well. So that's why bubbles happen. And funny enough, I still remember this as well. Another vivid memory is on January 13, 2018, front page, New York Times, there was an article that said, everyone is getting hilariously rich and you're not. And it had a picture of two guys, one in a Bitcoin sweater, one guy in an Ethereum sweater, smiling ear to ear. And that happened to be the top of Ethereum at $1,400. So anyways, the market's obviously maturing from then. What we quickly realized was that, there's still, at its core here, there's something very important, right? And that's the fact that, okay, a lot of this was crazy, a lot of it was, unnecessary, but a lot of capital was invested in this market. I think ICOs raised about $8 billion last year globally from people around the world, which was insane. And now that this market is maturing, now that more regulations are in place, now that more sophisticated investors are getting involved, and obviously now that people have learned their lessons, we're going to see, the next 10 years of this marketplace grow to way bigger than it is today.
Great, thank you. So as I mentioned, we will end the panel part of it, but we'll. Oh yeah.
So I'm looking to hire someone. And the job will be posted on Luminary. I think it'll go out in the email tomorrow. I'm looking for a senior accountant to join my team in CoinSquare Mining. We're doing some very exciting things, and I have been deviated off into doing much more complex finance things for cryptocurrency and mining, which I'm still learning how to do. So I really am looking for someone who's a great problem solver, scrappy, wants to roll up their sleeves and really learn what's going on in the industry. So if you're interested, come and see me afterwards, or you can apply online tomorrow.
And everybody knows the most important thing about whatever the next job you get is the person that you're working for. So there you go. This is the best one around. So first of all, can I get a big round of applause for these three? Thank you. We gave them an impossible task, and they didn't do it in 10 seconds, but they did do it very well, and I think we all have a lot, or we have all learned a lot from this, I hope. And as I said, so number one, let's just actually... Sorry, Adam's got to get the lovely gifts that we're going to hand our amazing panelists here today. You know, it's great seeing. The thing that I love the most is I can say this. I think this is our 11th or 12th event, and every single one of our speakers on all the crazy diverse topics have all been CPAs. Every single one of them. And so I think that should give you or hearten you to the fact that regardless of whatever change happens in our industry and our profession as technology takes over, we are super adaptable, flexible people, and we're the next leaders in blockchain, we're the next leaders in AI, we're the next leaders in anything we want to be if we put our mind to it. So that's number one. Number two, if you want to be the next leader and the person that finds out what Luminary is doing next, we need beta testers. So please reach out to somebody in a Luminary t-shirt. Specifically that guy holding the camera pointing it at me right now. His name is Mo. Say hi to Mo. And yeah, so let's do this part. Sorry that we're changing the schedule mid event today, so just bear with us. Thank you, Alan, Katie, Saad. This was awesome. Really appreciate it. I know everybody here really enjoyed having your insight here. So we will stop for 2 minutes, enough time to get people who have somewhere that they need to be to go. One of the big things we like to pride ourselves on is that we keep things to an hour. So this time it's an hour now, but it won't be when we're done the Q&A. So if you need to go, please feel free to go. No problem at all. And in 2 minutes, we will come back with questions. Thank you.